There are legends of people with the gift of making music so true.
We've been gone a long time. We back now.
You twins?
Nah, we cousins.
There are legends of people with the gift of making music so true. It can conjure spirits from the past and the future. This gift can bring fame and fortune.
Will somebody take me in your eyes?
But it also can pierce the veil between life and death.
Listen here, this ain't no house party.
Shit.
Y'all ready to drink? Y'all ready to sweat till y'all stink?
You want some?
You keep dancing with the devil.
Careful, boy. You gonna bite off more than you can chew.
One day he's gonna follow you home.
We got us a problem, y'all.
What the hell going on?
Oh, we heard tale of a party.
This world already left you for dead. I can save you from your fate.
You don't need no saving.
Yes, you do.
And you are?
I am your way out. Don't cry. It's all better now.
Yes, I lied to you.
I don't believe in magic. Ghosts, demons. Just power.
Somebody please take me. Take me.
We gonna kill every last one of you.
I ain't mean to scare you. Thought y'all done forgot about me in here. Come on, open the door, let me on out of here.
Stay. It's you?
Of course it's me, open the door.
That ain't your brother.
Lie to you.
Yo, smell anything? I think I shot myself.
All right. Well, what's going on, everybody? Y'all know who it is. I'm just jumping on here for a little hot minute. Yesterday I went, after all the hubbub I've noticed, and I just kind of noticed like there's been a real push on for this Sinners movie with Ryan Coogler. I've been seeing people post about it and talk about it. So much that it kind of caught my attention. Now, you guys may know that, I just recently launched my media channel, which is like a digital newspaper. And, movie reviews is one of the things that, we're going to be doing with I'm Just Saying Media. And, we got our first review in last week or so with a review of the House of David series, which is playing right now on Amazon. But it's a movie review thing, and and if anybody knows me, I've always been a big movie fan. Actually, even went to film school and studied film, and so reviewing films is right up my alley. Back in my day when I was a journalist, it's one of the things I did. I wrote movie reviews for the different papers that I worked for. So it's nothing particularly out of the ordinary. But if you guys have, like listened to like my most recent podcast where we officially launched I'm Just Saying Media, and I talked about, how post 2020 things change. And I just think we're in a whole new space in terms of everything, every institution. I don't care what it is. It could be your job, your school, your family, movies, you name it. Everything seems to have changed. Again, 2020 was the lifting of the veil. It was the beginning of a whole new era, as far as I'm concerned. And so I don't see hardly anything quite like I used to before. And now comes along this movie. And the more I heard about it, the more I kind of picked up on what was going on. My spider senses start tingling. And I come to you now not as your friendly neighborhood sports guy, but just as a mild-mannered reporter, once again. And, so I wanted to check out this movie because I kept, everywhere I go, I just, when the system is pushing something, when no matter where you go, you can't get away from it. And so, even people who don't normally even do movie reviews, they were talking about it. People like Roland Martin, his thing is politics. And yeah, he does celebrity entertainment and stuff like that, but not so much like movies per se. But like him and Boyce Watkins and, all these other kind of political commentators, they're all talking about it. And then, of course, there every, Black online personality is like got something to say or weighing in on the subject. So I'm like, okay, let me see this, and I was a little worried about it. And I went to see it yesterday. And so much so that I didn't take my wife with me. You know, she had work to do and stuff, and I had a day off, and so I figured I would just go check it out, on my own because of the subject matter. My wife's, she's a born again Christian, like, and she don't really get down with horror movies and stuff like that. But again, me on the other hand, I'm Edward Punker Jr. Geans' oldest son. And when I came up, we had a saying in the house. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For I am the evilest son of a in the valley. So, I don't live by fear. And, and particularly when it comes to, I'm not a horror movie fan. I definitely say that. I've never been a fan of like slasher movies, where they're just killing and stuff just for the sake of killing, and somehow you would find that entertaining. Nah, that ain't never been my thing. It's got to have a story to it, to engage me, as an artist, as a consumer of art. And but I am a fan of certain vampire films, things like the Anne Rice books, and of course the Interview with a Vampire movie, the first one. Bram Stoker's Dracula, of course, is a classic, and for good reason. It's a classic tale. You got the Blade movies in the superhero genre. You got things like Lost Boys, which I've always been a big fan of that. It's kind of like a fun kind of teenage movie, but again, it has some horror elements. Which brings me to this movie, which is they call it genre fluid, meaning, it's got elements of horror, action, it's kind of a period piece, kind of a crime drama, gangster film, a lot of different, genres all kind of mixed into one. And I'm a fan of that kind of thing too, because, to me, good stories kind of blend all those elements because all those things are elements of life. Life isn't just, a great love story. It's got a little crime drama, a little suspense, a little thriller, a little adventure. It's got a little bit of everything. And so to me, it's just life. When those kind of elements are played, that's just good storytelling. And so, but anyway, I decided to go to see the film without my wife because I know, again, she, wouldn't warm up to it, so much. And even myself, I have to say, like, I wasn't, really, it's not something I had the intention of seeing. I had seen the promos and stuff. Every time you every time you go on, you cut on the TV or get online, you see the promos and stuff. But, with everything that's going on in the world, which is, a little bit too demonic for me anyway. And it seems like to me, like now, almost everything Hollywood puts out now is some kind of witchcraft or demonic or something, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm good. The news is horrible enough. I don't need to watch this stuff for entertainment. And, that's pretty much where I was. But again, they kept pushing it so much, my spider senses started tingling to the point to where I figured, like, you know what, let me go ahead and see this just to see what they're up to, just to see what they are pushing. And I'm glad that I did, because I'll say this, the movie turned out to be better than I thought it would be. Because I got to say, in retrospect, I realized I kind of underestimated Ryan Coogler here, because I think he's a sincere filmmaker who's really trying to make his mark as a Black film director and somebody to be taken seriously. And I think if you go back and look at his career, that's all there, And, I first heard of Ryan Coogler. I was in Detroit, and we had did the 13 in the Hole documentary. And, you know, and it just so happened that our documentary got picked up for this award. So it was called Culture Unplugged. And it was like a film festival that focused specifically on community-based cultural films, right? And our documentary, 13 in the Hole, got picked up, but also in that same, I guess, round of features that they were picking up was Ryan Coogler's first film, which was Fruitvale Station. You know, based on a true incident of basically like, you know, a police killing out in San Francisco that happened on the train system there called, and that was at a station over in San Francisco called Fruitvale Station. You know, and I had lived in the Bay Area for about 9 years. I had ridden the BART system. So I knew that rang a bell when I first heard it. And, you know, hear the whole backstory. Oh, it's this kid from Oakland, you know, and here's this. And this director from Oakland was telling this Oakland story. And I was like, wow, okay, that was cool. And then, you know, the thing blew up. And it was an honor for us, you know, because me and Rhonda Anderson, who was kind of a mentor of mine, you know, when I was in Detroit, and a couple other people, you know, had worked to put the whole 13 in the Hole thing together, which was like an environmental justice film about polluting at the or tar sands oil refinery, like a neighborhood in Southwest Detroit was being polluted and negatively affected by this tar sands oil refinery kind of just being there in their backyard. And so they picked up on our documentary, but they also picked up on this new film by this young up and coming director named Ryan Coogler. And so, you know, we were on the call, and it must have been him. You know, again, I didn't know him from Adam at the time, and I didn't think nothing about it. And but you know, we were all on the call, and they interviewed us about, you know, what it was like to make the films and stuff like that. And then and I want to say that at least last time I checked, that documentary, no, that film festival is, I'm sure, is still around. The thing I'm thinking about, I think, is another. No, I think it is. It's Culture Unplugged. But I think if you go there to this day, you can still find 13 in the Hole. At least last time I checked, it was still there. And about Fruitvale Station, I'm not sure. But anyway, that was the first time I heard of Ryan Coogler. And of course, you know, since then, that was his big thing. That put him on the map. He then made the Creed films, which was like an homage to the old Rocky films. Like, him and his dad were big Rocky fans. Then he, you know, wanted to make a Black Rocky film. And he came up with this idea of making these films around Apollo Creed's son. That blew up. And then that opened the door for him to get on with Marvel and then do the Black Panther movies, you know. And, you know, but now this film here is his first film that he has both written, directed, and produced. That means he wrote the story, he directed the movie, and he was a producer. In other words, he had full creative control, which is rare for any director, more or less like a Black director. Now, it came out under Warner Brothers, so obviously it's still like you know, like a corporate product. But at the same time, you know, he, at least ostensibly, was given full creative control to do this project. And you know, and now having seen it, you know, I gotta say, it was better than I thought, you know, because like, you know, like his last Black Panther movie was complete trash. I could not get into that at all. The first Black Panther I thought was a little overhyped. It was good. It was okay, but but at the same time, it was interesting artistically in a lot of ways, and even as a comic book story, you know, it kind of gave us that character in that world for the first time, which was cool. And for like cultural reasons, you know, Black people and a lot of people just really threw flowers at the film and stuff like that. But as a story, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I mean, it was just okay. I just felt it could have been better, particularly as a comic book fan. And we're talking about the Black Panther. Like for me, you could have done better than that. But now the Creed films were good. Were solid, good, solid movies. And then Fruitvale Station, I think rightly put him on the map because that is a good movie. And he deserved all his flowers for that, particularly being his first film. That kind of put him on the map and let everybody know, like, hey, this guy is a talented young filmmaker, and that earned him his spot. So he has no shade for me whatsoever when it comes to Fruitvale Station, because that was legit, any way you look at it. And of course, he kind of has this director actor thing going on, like Quentin Tarantino and certain guys. Like Tarantino has certain people who are like in all his films. They're like repeatedly in each one of his films, kind of like Samuel L. Jackson. I think is kind of the most obvious character or actor that's kind of tied to him in that way. But there are some others that kind of repeat in his shows. But he has this kind of relationship with Michael B. Jordan. And I think that was Michael B. Jordan's first real come up as a movie star anyway. Maybe he was on some TV or something before, which I stopped watching TV, back in the early 90s. But he became a movie star by his relationship with Ryan Coogler. And that kind of put him on the map as a film star. And he's one of the biggest in the business today because of the films that they've done together. And as you can see by here on the thumbnail, in this particular film, he gets a double feature. He plays twin brothers, Smoke and Stack. One guy you can see there with the blue hat on, one with the red hat. And, it's pretty cool. And I'll tell you what, let me say this before we kind of go a little bit more on. I'm going to do a non-spoiler review right now. And then tomorrow sometime, me and Kelly plan to go see the movie together. And then we're going to get both of our reactions, and then we can kind of get into spoilers. So the movie's been out a week or so, and so it's out. And so there are a lot of spoiler things out there, but I want to wait until me and Kelly both have seen it, and you can get our reactions. And I'm sure Kelly's reactions are going to be very interesting. But I wanted to give you mine because I want to critique this thing in a kind of global sense, in the context of what Hollywood has become. In the same way, like what has our media and our government and our other institutions have become, because whatever they were, kind of like in this movie, there's a segment where that ain't your brother no more, okay? Whatever Hollywood was before, and there was a lot to like there, because again, I was always a big movie buff. I'm a fan of these movies. And I thought movies were like a great gift to, human art and human storytelling. But just like everything else, it's been taken over by some really evil forces, and they're being used to sinister purposes, And I could sense that there was something going on here. So I kind of had to check it out because it's right up the alley. It's like the perfect movie for me to be reviewing as I launch my own media company and my own media network. I'm just saying, because all of the elements are there and I could see it coming from a mile away. And I'll say this too, having seen it, I was pleasantly surprised. It was a better movie than I expected. I expected it to be kind of same type of garbage that Hollywood puts out all the time that nobody's interested in. But I think they got Ryan Coogler in here and let him have creative control to do this kind of movie because he would make something good enough to capture the imaginations of a lot of people and get them interested. Now, so far, I think it's been, and again, this is part of the system, it's been critically very well received. I think the Rotten Tomato score is like 98%, which that right there is a red flag these days. Because common sense and just, out of any artistic sensibility, whatever, nothing's going to get, near 100%, rating. When you're talking about art, there's always going to be something to criticize. Some people are going to like it, some people not. There'll be varying opinions. But, 100%, come on, So that's one red flag. And, as a person who's been into movies and stuff throughout this whole period, the movies that they put out nowadays that are rated that high are just some of the most god-awful, unwatchable pieces of trash anybody could ever hope to put out. But I have to give Coogler credit. This ain't one of those. It's an interesting movie. And if a movie should be nothing else, it should be interesting. And this is not only interesting, it's a good story. It's a good, solid story. It's, well told in a lot of ways. But, don't, at the same time, don't believe the hype. A lot of people out here just hyping this movie like, oh, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it's so mind-blowing, and it's such a great gift to Black culture and all that. It's like, oh, slow down, calm yourself. It's not quite all that. And particularly if you know how to look at it through the proper lens, at least that's where I'm going to come from. You can see the hidden hand behind it all and what they're trying to do, and we'll get into that as we go. But again, Kelly's going to join us after she and I go see it. We're going to do our spoiler review of it. But for right now, I'm going to switch over and we're going to go down my ticker and break down my thoughts on this film. Okay. So let's start with the good. I always want to start out with the positive. And I've touched on some of it already. The good is the directing. Well, matter of fact, hold on. Let's go into this. I keep forgetting I'm solo today. So we're going to go solo Manolo.
We've been gone a long time.
Oops.
We back
Sorry
now.
about that.
You twins?
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, let's get into this, all right? First, actually, I'm going to save this to the last because I think this is where this all is leading for me. And it's a peek behind the veil. And this is ultimately where this thing is going to go for me. But the good, to start out, is that this is Ryan Coogler's auteur effort, right? So when I went to film school, one of the things you learn about is there was this movement in film called the auteur movement, which was basically these group of directors who wanted to kind of break some of the rules. They wanted to be more than the kind of typical tropes that you would find in film. Where the story would be like a cookie cutter thing where you had a good guy, the bad guy. They would go on an adventure. He has, his trials and tribulations, a 3-act story, and the happy ending, But the rules, it was kind of like any of the rules could be broken at any time, And it was all about giving the creative freedom to the director to break any of those rules so long as it was done in an interesting and an artistic way, right? And so on this film, Ryan Coogler did that. You can tell this guy's a serious film student, and at the same time, nobody in Hollywood, if you understand what's going on with Hollywood in this world today, nobody is going to be giving the big stage like this and get this kind of a push from the system unless it's pushing a part of the system's agenda and something that they want out there. Now, I'll say this too, and I learned this in film school also, and this was always very interesting to me, particularly as a general student of history. From the very beginning, like governments and all these powerful agents of society, they always understood the importance of film. And they always worked to use film for their own ends. So that part is not quite anything new. It's always been that way to some degree. But now it's just, again, to where the whole system is so bought out. Particularly when you talk about in terms of the balance between art and finance, where, an artist does things from this purely creative impulse, where, the money changers, their thing is, well, how can I make money off of this, And so, you always had that kind of friction because in order to make a movie, it does take money and financing and all these different forces and parts coming together to make a film. A film isn't like, drawing on a piece of paper, or painting. One person can sit down and do that. But when it comes to making a film, it takes a team of people in a very sophisticated ways, and also with technology and equipment and, financing, all of it has to come together to produce a film. It is a human endeavor. It is not something that, is just done, like by a single person. It's always by nature, by necessity, has to be a group effort. And but for Ryan Coogler to be in this position today with everything that's going on now, and as corrupt and as evil and demonic as Hollywood has shown itself to be, unequivocally, then, and I like the guy, and he seems like a good guy, but yeah, so did Tom Hanks. You can't trust none of them nowadays. And and again, okay, then look at the subject matter. Like I said, that just seems to be the thing anymore. Nobody's making good old-fashioned romantic comedies and all that anymore. Everything has a satanic agenda in it somewhere. And this, of course, being a vampire movie, you don't have to look very far. It's coming, and it's definitely there. But again, as a director, Coogler does a great job because he, like his use of color, even again what we saw with the Michael B. Jordan characters, one red, one blue. That's a very typical basic trope that they all use, and of course I even use it, in my media branding because it works. It's something very fundamental, very universal about that, between red and blue. If you can tell whether a star is moving away from you or coming towards you by the tint of color that is between blue and red. That's how elemental these things are programmed into, all of the universe. So that's why a lot of people use those colors. Um, but, the cinematography, the score, the music, the themes, you can see that, again, not only did he produce and direct it, he wrote it. And I know as a writer, you do a project like this, you do your research on it. You delve into this subject matter. You try to pick out all those things you can use that you could blend into it to make a good story. And he did his due diligence. In a lot of these crappy movies they make nowadays, you can tell they kind of ham-handedly, clumsily picked something out that they thought might make some sense, but it's so ham-handed and so clumsy. It's just an insult to your intelligence, and you're like, what idiot even thought that should even be in there? But this is one of those films. It's like everything that's in there, you can tell there's an intelligence behind it. There's a reason behind it. There's a purpose for it to be there. And Ryan Coogler brought all of that as an artist who had full creative control over his project to the table in this. And I got to give him credit for that. At the end of the day, the story is not perfect. It does have some plot holes, but again, with that art, he's got that auteur thing going in it, and he gets a pass on that because as an auteur director, I ain't worried about it's not about the plot, and I'll give you guys this example that just kind of let you know what I'm talking about, without giving too much away in the film. You know how there's this old saying in the club, first let me kind of lay out the plot, at least let you guys, if you haven't seen it, you know what the basic plot is. The basic plot is there are these two twin brothers, they're like, World War II veterans, World War I veterans who, from the Deep South, Black guys, experienced all the horrors of war and racism in the war. Then they get out and, go up north to Chicago, try to make a living. They end up, it's during Prohibition, so they end up working for Al Capone and into this whole gangster culture life. And somehow they survive all that. And then they move back down home, down south to someplace down in Mississippi, and they're going to open up a business. They're going to open up a nightclub and, try to do their thing down there. And then, things go left from there. But that's the basic setup and the premise of the whole movie. But anyway, so any Black person that likes to party and has been out and party and stuff, there's this old saying like, the roof is on fire. We don't need no water. Let the motherfucker burn. And all that, right? And there's a moment in the movie, and everybody talk about the music, and there's this scene that everybody talks about where, it's like this magical thing that's going on with all this music and dancing, and it's trippy and all that. And then it goes up to the roof, and the roof is burning. It's on fire. And, that kind of metaphor, it's there, and you would have to know Black culture to appreciate that. It's got little tiny, nice little touches of artistry in there like that really, I have to take my hat off to the man. I said, boy, you showing out there, like, And so as a director, he really brought his A game to it. This was his chance to kind of do his thing, and he brought his A game, But the point I'm trying to make on something like that is like, okay, yeah, normally I would say like, well, how in the hell the roof was burning? Man, that don't make no sense. If the roof was burned, then later on the roof was fine. No, it ain't that kind of party. That was just an artistic thing to kind of convey a certain message about what was going on. It wasn't meant to be taken literally or to even be considered literally in the film. It was just one of those things of being caught up in the ecstasy of the party at the moment where you are having such a great time, you don't care if the roof is burning or not. Matter of fact, the fact that the roof is burning, that's appropriate for that moment because you don't care, and that's the whole thing. And I will just say, well done on those kind of things. And there's a lot of little stuff like that throughout this movie. Now, one thing I got to say too, like, I don't want to be a hypocrite about this when I sort of raise these concerns in the end about, this movie being a, well, for lack of a better term, a conspiracy to foment like racial tensions and like a race war in the country, in the society. Because ultimately, I just gonna give away spoiler alert on this. That's ultimately what I think is happening. But at the same time, I would be a hypocrite to sort of throw Coogler on the bus for this because even myself, like I said, I'm a vampire. I like a well-told vampire story, and it just so happens that the full-length movie that I wrote, that I did for myself, is a vampire story with a lot of similarities to this particular story. The vampires, the music, all of it, And but I was writing this pre-2020 when I thought it was just fantasy, just something you just make up. But knowing what I know now post-2020, it's like I don't know what to think about things sometimes. I really don't, you know. But again, he did a good job. And yeah, but mine is called The Queen of the South Shall Rise Trilogy. But here's the sinners, and he beat me to the punch. He did a good job. It's different in a lot of ways, but it's got a lot of similarities too. And maybe I'm wrong to sort of ascribe that he's being controlled by the man, because somehow that kind of vision was planted in my soul at one time. So maybe he came about it honestly. I don't know. But now, as far as the acting, for me, I would say the acting's kind of hit and miss. A lot of it is a miss. I think it falls down for the most part with the acting. Some of it is fine. And of course, you got people like Delroy Limbo in there. If anybody knows Delroy, well, we'll go over some of that when Kelly comes on. But he's the real deal. I mean, he's a superb actor. Not just a black actor, but just an actor. Period. He's just one of the best in the business. And to make my point about it, like one of my big problems with the acting in this movie, which on a lot of black Hollywood movies, I say the same thing, because rarely, if ever, can they get a Southern accent right. Almost every time you see these movies, about slavery or the South or whatever, and you see people, black and white to some extent, but particularly if it's a black accent, and they try to do a black Southern accent, it is so phony, so fake. It's like, don't nobody from no state in the South talk like that. What are y'all, you see actors, it's kind of like an acting thing. Somehow the actors tend to believe that black people in the South talk like that, And I think it goes back to the literature, over the years, because I remember like when I was reading a lot of black history books and stuff back in the day, they would talk like that, to where, but it was like growing up in the South, it's like, I don't know nobody talk like that, Where y'all getting that from? That's off. But to just show you how good of an actor that Delroy Limbo is, he's the only actor in the film who can get a black Southern accent right. And then somebody had the nerve, one of the commentators said, but I couldn't understand nothing he was saying. Yeah, that's because you ain't never been down south. Black people down south, particularly in Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, stuff like that, we do talk like that. Real fast, and they stutter and you know what I mean? It's like some of us do talk like that. That's that nervous trauma, coming out of us. We don't talk like, hey, boy, is the house in the barn? Oh, man, I don't know about that, Ducky. Don't know black folks talk like that. And Michael B. Jordan and a lot of those characters in this film, they talk like that. It's like, oh, God, please. In 2025, we can't do no better. Come on, give me a break. So, you got some of that, but we've learned to live with that. And I think for the most part, everybody seems to overlook it. But for me, it's just like the type of thing that's hitting you in the face. I'm like, really, dude? But shout out to Delroy, because Delroy at least is the one person in the film that could show Hollywood or anybody paying attention how black people in the South really talk. And I'll say this one thing before I go on. I remember when I was in Detroit, and it was this one guy. He was married to this famous activist named Grace Lee Boggs. And Grace Lee Boggs was like this Chinese woman, or Asian woman, I think she's Chinese, who married a black guy and became like this famous activist. Like in activist circles, she was like a guru, you know, and certain people like swore by her and lifted her up as some kind of an icon or whatever. But part of that, why she could do that in Detroit, because she was married to this black guy. His name was James Boggs. And if you ever heard James talk, you know, you could tell James was brother from Deep South. And he talked like Delroy does in the movie. Talk real fast, man, you can't understand what he's saying. You'll come to, hey, man, you know what I'm saying? Um, and I remember hearing people in Detroit, like I was watching one of those documentaries they put together in Detroit, and they had to put up subtitles for James Lee Ball when James was talking, you know, because it was kind of like, now to a, you know, Chinese woman, not that Grace had a Chinese accent, you know, she talked perfectly good English. But for this black guy from the South who was speaking English, they felt they needed to put subtitles up for him because, at least for the people up north, they couldn't understand what he was saying. I could understand him because all my uncles and kinfolks, they talk like that. And I do too, to a certain extent. Um, but you know, let me see some of the other acting. Um, you know, again, in the white guy, you know, too, it had old syrupy, old kind of language, and yeah, you know, some, you know, you got goobers in the South, sure, true, but it's like, you know, that's so stereotypical. It's like that's bad acting. So in that sense, the acting could have been better. The people who acted, I think, acted well. Speaking of the Asians in the group, there was a Asian couple, you know, who had a daughter. They was like a, um, you know, they had like a store in town, and so they knew these two brothers when they came back to town, and they came to get their supplies and stuff at their store. But the Asian couple, that was pretty well acted in the sense that I like their depiction because, again, if you're from the South, you know, that was a thing. You know, like, you know, well, yeah, for the most part, then you didn't have too many blacks owning their own store, their own community. But they would allow like an Asian family or a Jewish family or Arab family or something like that to open the store in the black community, you know, or, you know, of course, there was some whites that would do it too. But like when we were growing up, at least on the west side of town, you know, they had a store. It was called the Chinaman. You know, it's right there on Main Street. And it was right there in the black neighborhood, you know. And you know, their kids went to school with us and everything. But they were like the only Asian family in town back in that time. And so that was always a thing, you know. It's kind of like, yeah, they did have Asians who would own a store right there in the black community. And you know, they didn't overact. They didn't act like stereotypical Chinese. They acted like Chinese Americans, you know, like who were just regular folk. They didn't, you know, talk all goofy and all that kind of stuff, you know. Um, but yeah, maybe we'll get into more of the acting when Kelly comes on. I've talked about the plot. Okay, but let's get into the social engineering because that's the heart of this, and that's the main thing I did want to get into in this spoiler-free review. You know, because and I know I got into this when I did my regular podcast lunch, you know, talking about news and stuff, and it was interesting. For those of you who didn't see it, definitely go check it out because you know, as soon as I started talking about how the government basically uses these honey traps to you know, influence celebrities influenced big shots, politicians, businessmen, and how they run all these things using underage, sex workers. My stream got cut off. And I guarantee you, if I say his name again, they probably do it again. So I'm gonna try not to say the name just to see if that works. I know other people do that and they can get through their stream. But the point is, that's a real thing. It's no longer not like a secret. It's underground. People don't know about it. People know about it. A lot of people want to turn a blind eye, but it does go on. And the main target of them is Hollywood. We all know about Puff Daddy, what's been exposed about him. And that's what he was doing. Now, if you kind of simple-minded and you kind of just look at things on the surface and that's what you're talking about. Yeah, man, Puff Daddy, man, he was out there, man, having sex with these little kids. He was having sex parties and stuff like that. Yes, he did, but he was doing it on behalf of Free Shannon Sharp. I got Mello in the house. Mello, I am gonna be on talking about sports, man. I told myself I wasn't gonna go live when I do these because I didn't want my sports crowd to get ran off. I know a lot of people is snowflakes these days. You talk about something serious, they'll go running high. They don't want to hear that. But I don't know where your mind is at, bro. But yeah, I heard my wife was telling me about Shannon and how he was got hemmed up messing around with some chick, you know what I mean? And so yeah, and I definitely, that's definitely something we'll be talking about. Because it is kind of the same type of thing, except for, with him, it's just a scandal. It's just like, he a grown man, she a grown woman. Now she a hoe. Anybody should know she's a hoe. And, but then he did lose his job behind it, apparently, from what I understand. And so, it can have consequences. He don't have to worry about going to jail or nothing like that, I guess. But, those things happen. People do get set up, and then people do trifling things too. And that's one thing. But now as it relates to Hollywood and all this kind of thing, in which, Shannon is a part of that world. Um, you know, those people are controlled in that way. They go to these parties, and even like a guy like Hugh Hefner with Playboy all those years. All these years we thought like, oh yeah, man, they got a big mansion out there, and these rich people go out there and all these celebrities and they have their little bunnies running around and all these celebrities, what kind of people out there doing something strange for a piece of change and all that. But we didn't know, who knows what's going on in the rooms and who knows what they getting set up with, man, woman, or child, or animal for that matter. And you got these big celebrities and politicians and famous people who go out there and get caught up in this stuff, and they get caught up, and matter of fact, like take a movie like The Godfather. They even told you in The Godfather, where that one politician was, trying to buck up against the Corleones. And then all of a sudden, he found himself in the room with the girl, and he wake up, the girl dead, and first he was cussing the Corleones out. Motherfucker, fuck you, I ain't doing nothing for you, and kiss my ass and all that. And then next thing you know, he changed his whole tune. And to the great Christopher Columbus, I'm a big fan of all the Italian Americans, all the Italian Americans in the world, you know what I mean? And they were telling you right then. And that was back out in the 70s. That's how this system works. And, so again, shout out to Ryan Coogler. He got in there, but they is not going to let nobody, especially no black guy, be put on out front like that if he ain't been compromised some kind of way. And I'm sure this was an honest effort of his to get out there and tell a story he wanted to tell. I really believe that, But at the same time, they're not going to put him or the story out there unless it's pushing part of something they want out there. If it wasn't, it wouldn't, because we saw that again post 2020. And just like I was talking about, when I said something out of line, they shut my stream down right then and there just last week. So you can't tell me that you're going to put out a major blockbuster motion picture and you're going to say, send all, and everybody, all the black community I've been seeing, they all out there, oh, see now they letting the cat out of the bag, and they really telling the story about all this hoodoo and Hanks and stuff that go on. And it's like, no, that's the purpose. They putting all that out there because they want you to embrace that stuff. They want you to think like, this is cool. This is the thing going on now. And this is how we gonna fight the man and all that. And I see a lot of people falling for it. I see a lot of people falling for it right now. And again, you have to understand how to decipher these things. You have to have discernment at this day and time, And so, again, I just said, it's all about getting, people in general, they're trying to turn men against women, fathers against sons, mothers against daughters. So black and white is just one aspect of it. It's not that, it's just about race either. They trying to get people across the board, brothers fighting each other, everybody. They just want everybody fighting against each other without realizing like these people is ruling over us and robbing us blind. And these movies get put out here, and I see a lot of these commentators and stuff out here talking about this movie. They're saying things like, "Oh yeah, see that tells us, like, look, no, you can't trust nobody. You got to be to yourself, and you let somebody in your door, and they're gonna turn into a vampire, and they're gonna kill everybody in the house, and all that kind of stuff." You know what I mean? It's like, and I say this like, I know it's a lot of people swear by that stuff these days. And so now it's to the point to where people don't know their neighbors. They don't know who live next door to them. They don't speak to them and all that. And I get it. You know what I mean? I'm in the world just like everybody else. But I know I grew up in a family where we had an open house on the neighborhood. Anybody could come by and get a plate to eat. Anybody could come in and get a beer, get in a game of dice, and just kick it, dude. That was the spot to go to. And that's just the kind of people we was. And I don't care what nobody say. We was a better community then than we are now. So you can talk your ass off about, I don't trust nobody, and I don't do this, and I don't do that, and all that. Okay, fine. You see the kind of world we living in. If that's what you want, then that's what you got. And, just like back in the day, yeah, if somebody came in and got a line, they get their ass whooped. There's ways to deal with it. You know what I mean? But you ain't got to see everybody as an enemy and everybody is the devil and all that kind of stuff. It's like, be careful about that. Because they trying to, send these messages out. And then people get caught up. God, man, I seen it in the movie, man. I seen it on TV. I seen it in the news. And that's how psychological programming works. And you really have to be careful about that. Again, you have to be discerning. Yeah, you don't just, somebody come in and they looking suspicious, doing suspicious stuff, that's one thing. But we talking about a lot of cases, people they doing this to their own kinfolks, brothers and sisters, or perfectly decent people. Like I said, I was working for the government up here, and we're like a government agency, and people come there for help, right? But there was such a mindset in the building that if, people like came into the building, they got lost, like, you know what I mean? And sometimes they would go to the wrong office or whatever, and they in there looking for help. And the workers in there be like, who are you? What you doing in here? You ain't supposed to be over here. Get out of here. It's like, they just lost. and just ask, hey, can I help you, sir? Oh, okay, you need to go over there. Okay, let me show you where it is. But, and again, I don't know what went on. I'm not from St. Louis. They probably had somebody come, and as much dirt as the government do, somebody probably did come in there disgruntled and slap somebody or do something one time. I don't know. But just because that happened one time, you can't live your life scared of everybody walk through the damn door. That's crazy. But that's the kind of world we living in now. But it gets propagated by watching the news, watching these movies, and that creates a lot of that in society. And then, of course, there's a lot of hurt and desperate people out there who are, mind is not right. And so, so I get it, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying, like, a lot of this stuff is social programming, and we got to be careful about that. And I'm sure I'm the only one saying this in this space, because everybody else I saw is like, oh, yeah, man, see, that's the message of the movie. That's the moral of the movie. Yeah, you can grab that out of it, but I don't know if that's the message you really want to pull out of it, But at the same time, it is there. And then I got to say this, because I thought this was the one thing that when I was watching the movie that I saw that really got my spider senses tingling. Because I was sitting there, I was enjoying the movie, thinking like, wow, man, this movie's better than I thought. And then it came to the one scene where, how can I say this without giving away spoilers? But it came to the one scene where, two people was fighting against each other. And the vampire was telling them like, look, just stop fighting me, just join us, we can get revenge and we can take over if you just, be a vampire and be like us, And I was like, wow, really? Wow, okay. Is that what we doing here? And it was like a long drawn out dialogue too, it wasn't like just bam bam. It was like they was really going back and forth. It was like a climactic part of the thing to where they was like really making that point home. And I was like, oh my God. That is so sinister. And it's directed at Black people too. You know what I mean? The whole message to it is to kind of tell Black people like, look, just go with this demonic stuff, right? This is our way to liberation. This is going to make us free. And I'm like, really, bro? Is that what we're supposed to come away from this from? Really? I was like, wow, man. So, like I said, I mean, I like Ryan Coogler, and he seemed like a good dude, but, you out there dealing with them people, man. I don't know what they didn't put you through, bro. I mean, we just seen this week. I mean, Mello was talking about Shannon Sharp. Look at Kanye. Look at him. He wanted to make it. He was considered a big successful, one of the greatest artists, whatever. And he got all kind of skeletons coming out of his closet now. It's like, man, you can't be in that world without them folks getting to you. You know what I mean? But at the same time, they got us scared of each other. Like your family, the people you know is decent, or, at least, I mean, I got crackheads and stuff in the family, and I love them. And even then, out of that love, they know, you do what you do out in the street, you bring your motherfucking ass over here, you're going to act right. They know. If you love them right, and treat them right, and feed them, take care of them, let them know they still family, Not to say that they won't try you, they won't steal you, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, at the end of the day, a lot of y'all will bury him like a roach, or other people who really in your family ain't did nothing to you. And a lot of them ain't did nothing but good to you, and nothing but love. I know I got people to this day. You know what I mean? They treat me like I'm whatever. And I said, you can't name nothing. I ain't never asked you for nothing. You ain't never gave me nothing. You ain't got nothing to give me. I don't even want nothing from you. But you somehow you want to try to act all crazy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what is that about? But then you'll run behind some stranger and put him up on the pedestal like, oh, he's a great guy because he got money. It's like, all right, go ahead. And then, then at some point, you fuck around and find out. Then you come back, But that's the okie doke that's being put on people nowadays, and it's really sad, But um, subtle sleight of hand. There's again, that's kind of what I was talking about. You get those little things where, like in the movie, it like builds up this whole thing. Like, okay, we all in it together. We're family. We're trying to do this thing. But then at a certain point, there's these little twists and turns. And this is good storytelling, don't get me wrong. But then all of a sudden things flip on you and you got to kind of like turn on the people you love. That seems to be one of the messages here. And again, we all get it. We do get hurt. We do get and you can't get to the point to where you're like, okay, I'm gonna love you, but I have to love you from a distance. I get it. I've been there. I'm there all the time now. But again, you just got to have this awareness when you're seeing these movies, putting out these messages where they're pushing these types of mindsets and agendas, and you can't just run with them. And I see, a lot of these people just running with it, and they're just enthusiastic about it. Like even when stuff like that happens, part of you should, you should grieve that. That's a loss. It's not something to be celebrated or, or feel like, you've done something positive, Asking the wrong questions. I'm sure we'll get into that with Kelly. Now, one thing I'll say too is like I didn't stick around for the after credits. Apparently, there's an after credits scenes that hints at that there's like a sequel. Like, part of the thing that they're celebrating about this film is supposedly that Ryan Coogler owns the IP for this, and he's going to set up a franchise, and he's going to be making more of these films, right? And so apparently that's a thing, and that's set up in the after credits. I didn't stick around to do it, I wanted to see it. I wanted to kind of understand what the message was. And again, when I sat there, I was like, okay, that was pretty good, but I didn't know about this after credit scene, so I just went ahead and left. But now, as I've been listening to more reviews and stuff about it, apparently there is one, and then they're setting up like future things if it makes money. Now, that's kind of up in the air because apparently it had a $90 million budget. It made 45, I think, in its first week. And so now there's this big push on to kind of promote the movie. And obviously I'm falling into that trap too, where, they want to see the movie make its money back so they can, make more of these films. But I think, the general mood in the country is that people ain't with all this demonic stuff. And like I said before, I'm somebody that used to be into these movies and even wrote one of these kind of movies myself. But even I if you got to read the room sometime. And if anybody was reading the room, it's like, people ain't trying to watch the Grammys and see people all in red and doing all kind of wicked demonic stuff. They ain't, and it's like they pushing that stuff everywhere, and they doing it too. You're just doing too much. And then now you want to come out with this and you want everybody to be just forget all about that and just run with it. And a lot of folks is just not having that. We can see the agenda and what's going on, and people don't want to even expose. They don't even want to open their minds to that. And that was part of the reason, again, why I didn't even want to take Kelly with me at first. I wanted to go see it for myself and kind of check it out and then talk to her about it and see how she felt or whatever, see if she wanted to do it. And, but I understand why people don't want to see the movie. And so that's why I wanted to come in and give a measured take, from the beginning. I don't want to be one of these people like, oh my God, this is a great cut. Every black person just run out and see it. Hell no, I'm not telling nobody that. It's like see it at your own caution and see it with, both eyes open. Don't go in there thinking like it's all fun and games, because you gotta, it's one thing to sit back and enjoy it for what it is, but at the same time, you want to watch it with a lens of awareness of how this is like subliminal programming and how this can be used to kind of, be subversive in certain ways. Because again, as a person who studied film, the makers of the film industry, they are very much aware of how to use film as a tool of subversion. And almost everything coming out of Hollywood these days is completely subversive. But again, not just Hollywood, everything coming out on your news is subversive. Everything coming out of your government is subversive. Everything you're getting taught in school is subversive. It's subverting the will of God and your will for your goodwill for your family into the will of people who don't have your best interests at heart. So again, I'm not telling people not to see it. I saw it. And as a film fan, I think it's worth seeing. But, again, my thing is only see it if you are doing it with a critical, discerning eye. Because you don't want to just fall for the okie doke and just drink it whole, and not understand how you're being played with this, So we'll see if they have any sequels or anything to come. And it'll be interesting to see like how the box office numbers actually come out in the long run, particularly with all this push and hype they got going on. We'll see. I pretty much give you all my key takeaways. And like I said, me and Kelly are going to see it later together, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do a spoiler review. But for now, speaking of Kelly, we about to go out and enjoy some of this nice spring weather. We're going to take a nice little long walk and hang out a little bit together here in the St. Louis area. But we'll be back tomorrow. Like I said, I'm going to try to do a spoiler review for that. Try to come on and do some sports talk either Friday or Sunday, but Sunday for sure if I don't get it in Friday. And again, I'm gonna come back with some more news for sure. Like I said, one monkey don't stop no show. And there's plenty of things to talk about on that, and it's gonna be coming hard and heavy coming up. So y'all look for you, boy. I got plenty more stuff for you. And like I said, for those of you, I understand if like I said, we live in a snowflake culture, and I understand, you don't want to deal with no hot subjects. So yes, if you're a snowflake, you might as well stay away from the stove, because you're gonna melt like hot butter on a plate. And I don't want that for you. I'm putting this out here into the ether. I'm putting it out here for a morphic resonance, and it's gonna find its audience. If it ain't for you, that's fine. No hard feelings. But at the same time, I gotta do what I gotta do, because it's the right thing to do. All right, everybody. Y'all be good. This is Patrick, your mild-mannered reporter, once again on the scene. And y'all be good.